Happy Friday. Hey, it's Friday. And again, the sun is out. I don't know, it's always sunny on Fridays. But today I want to welcome Sue Berman. She is a real estate attorney, and I'm really happy to have her here. And we're going to start out just discussing who all the players are, why we have attorneys in Illinois, and some of the players in the process. So welcome, Sue.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, Betsy. And I am a little bit of a real estate nerd. And so every time I have an audience, I welcome anybody who will listen to me talk about real estate because I love it. In the past 2 years, we all got a crash course in being experts in real estate, no matter what you do. So thank you for having me on. So I think before we get into the nuts and bolts, it's important to know who all the players are because you're going to hear these names. Betsy is a realtor, and that's the person who, when you're selling a home, she'll list it for you, find a buyer, or if you're looking for a home, she will list it, buying or selling. She does both ends. She also has a great, I assume, bag of resources of people if you need recommendations. So after the contract is signed, I get involved. I'm a lawyer in Illinois. Typically, you have 5 to 7 to 10 business days to review a contract and to do an inspection. And this works for both sides. The seller has a contingency for the attorney review, and the buyer has an attorney review and inspection contingency. So I get involved. I review the contract, make suggested changes. I work with a lender. I pull the buyer and the seller through the process. For the sales, I draft the closing documents. I order title. I order survey, or the Homeowners Association documents. For buyer, I'm looking out for you on the legal end. So we have some other players. If you're buying a single family home or a townhome, you have a surveyor. They come out, they take dimensions of the property. It's really important to know if you're buying that house, 123 Main Street, that is the property you're buying and it's not legally described as another property. The title company plays two roles in this. Number one, they do a report on title, and they don't make judgments. They just tell you this is what it is. There are easements, there are restrictions, the taxes are paid, the taxes are not paid. Here's open mortgages. Here are the covenants. Here's the HOA documents that are recorded. Then the title company also plays another role. In Illinois, most people close in escrow. So what happens is I think of everybody sitting at a table with a couple baskets. The seller throws all their documents in one basket. They throw the survey in, they throw the deed in, they throw any transfer stamps in. The buyer throws in a different basket the money. The lender throws their money in the basket. If you have a homeowners association, again, these things end up somewhere on the closing table. The title company, the escrow officer, takes all these documents, and when title is clean and they approve the deed, they transfer the money to the seller, they record the deed, buyer gets title, and in a title insurance policy, the lender is insured on the mortgage, and everybody goes home happy. Buyers get the keys. That's the most important thing. Seller gets the money. Everybody's happy. I love doing real estate because it's transactional. It does get confrontational sometimes, but I love working. Everybody's happy at the end.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. And there is a homeowners association if you have an HOA, and they get involved in submitting documents to the buyer for review. So those are the major players, and the lender, obviously, if you have a lender, they're involved in this process also.
Right. So most of the time, it's a very happy situation, but sometimes there are some pitfalls and things that over the years, through experience, you and I watch out for. So maybe you can, and they always end up in the lawyer's lap.
Yes.
So if we don't hit, get them taken care of before they end up in the lawyer's
right.
lap.
And to hit a road bump is not unusual. And I would say my best advice is when you hit the road bump, pick up the phone and call somebody.
Right.
Don't forget to tell people about it or think it's not a big deal. So I would say for the seller, probably the number one pitfall is failure to disclose. If you have a leaky roof, if you painted over that basement that flooded and never had somebody come out and fix the cracks, that's going to come out someday. If you fail to disclose that an appliance is not working, it's going to come back to haunt you, whether it's at the inspection or at the walkthrough. Also, if a buyer's asking you if you've had permits, anything like that, and you say, "Yep, I got all the permits," and it turns out you didn't, that can come back to haunt you too. Maybe you forgot to get permits. Maybe you didn't need a permit. Maybe your contractor told you they got permits. So I would say for a seller, you have to be careful what you agree to disclose, both in the disclosure and during attorney review. So
I just think you have to be honest. If you didn't pull permits, you didn't pull permits, okay?
Right.
If there's a leak someplace, there's a leak someplace. And it's sort of, everything's okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, it's okay, whatever it is, as long as you're honest about what it is.
Well, the parties will have a conversation about it.
Right.
If it turns out your roof does have a leak, then maybe you'll put money in escrow to fix it, or maybe the seller will
Right.
fix it, or maybe the buyer will say, "Give me a credit, I'm going to put on a new roof anyway."
Right.
Or maybe
Exactly.
maybe it's covered under insurance and
Right.
it's really not a big deal.
Right.
So I would say the next thing is, if you have something as a seller and you want to take it with you, take it out before you list the property. If you have an heirloom chandelier, if you have a mirror in the bathroom that you love and it matches all the other furniture, get rid of it, take it out, replace it with Home Depot. Okay, nobody's probably going to know. But if you don't, if you decide later you want it, or you start removing things when you move out, that's going to be a headache for everybody. Your buyer's going to be mad. Now they have to go buy a new chandelier, hire an electrician. So take out what you want to keep and replace it. It goes with I'm sure you tell people to declutter. Same thing.
Well, I use a form, and that question is on there. So
Perfect.
If there is anything you want, take it. And we have to be careful because some people are in a rush.
Yes.
They overlook things. And it's really important when you are buying or selling one of the largest assets in your life, probably, that you slow down in this crazy world and pay attention. So.
And there's a lot of detail, and I'm detail oriented. So I will also send the client a questionnaire or a contract memo that says, "Have you checked the personal property? Do you mean to keep all this stuff?" Attorney review, you can maybe negotiate, but afterwards. The next thing I find that can become a problem is when sellers don't know how they hold title to the property. In a trust, if it's in an LLC, if you sign that contract in your personal capacity, not only are you creating personal liability where there is none, but this is going to carry through. And now you have a conflict between how you sign the closing documents and how you sign the contract. And for a buyer's lender, they're going to want addendums, and they're going to know, why did you sign this? So sellers are advised. I have access to the deed records. You can call the title company. It's very easy to find out how you hold title. I frequently find out it's in a trust and they have no idea it's in a trust. And that's and then you also need clearance for closing. So you can't wait till the last minute.
Right.
So the other thing is, along with that, if you have old mortgages or if you had liens on the property, we've all been there, that there's 3 mortgages, you refinance 3 times, and the lender forgot to send a release, or the release was never recorded. So make sure, and that's an attorney's job, is to check that. But if you know of an old mortgage, or when I call you and say, "Hey, this mortgage from 6 years ago was never released," get on it right away. That will hold you up from closing.
Right.
If you've hired contractors and you didn't pay them, they're going to file a lien on your property. And then you have to clean that up at closing. Boundary line disputes with neighbors, surveys. It happens. People are fighting over fence lines, or you put a shed over an easement, or your building line encroaches, or your house encroaches over a building line. Those are problems. Those are not horrible, awful problems, but they may slow up the closing.
Mhm.
Special assessments on an HOA or failure to disclose an increased assessment. It's March. Not all associations have done their budget for 2022 yet. Some of them are still
Right.
going through it because of pandemic. If you have a special assessment, don't sit on it and think that the buyer's not going to find out about it. They'll find out about it very quickly. There is, again, for us property nerds, there's a lot of litigation out there about failure to disclose in homeowners association. And I'm sure you're familiar with this one, Betsy, not moving out on time,
Mhm.
not being ready, having the buyers call it junk. The seller calls it, I have this lovely pool table. The buyers call it junk. Get your junk out of here.
Yes. Yeah. It needs to be, unless it's agreed upon. And I did have that closing. An hour before closing, there's a refrigerator in the garage. The seller thought, well, don't you want that? No, I do not want that. So I'm on the phone with my junk guy. How fast can you get here? And luckily he did, but that's a problem.
And the other thing is for sellers, if you agree to repair an item for closing, do it. Don't wait to the last minute. I understand some sellers want to wait until the mortgage contingency runs because they don't want to spend $5,000 to repair a sewer system if the buyer doesn't want it. But work something out. Don't wait to the last minute. The buyer will ask you for a receipt. And if you're repairing multiple items, get those items, get them itemized and get a paid receipt. Nobody wants to find out after closing that you did this and you didn't pay the contractor. The other bit of advice I tell buyers and sellers, keep your camera phone with you. If you're a seller and you know there's a big crack in the mirror, take a picture of that. If you're a buyer and you go on the walkthrough and something's broken, take a picture of it. I mean, I've had stories where a buyer's 11 o'clock at night, there's a huge crack in the mirror, and the realtor pulled up the listing pictures and there was a big crack in the mirror. So take pictures. This stuff does help when it comes to, he said, she said types of issues. So those are my main seller pitfalls.
And for buyers?
Well, buyers, I think the first thing is when you do an inspection, don't send it to your realtor or your attorney and say, here, list everything. You need to read this. I don't live in the property. I don't know what's important to you. Electric may be important to me. It may not be important. You may be planning to redo the house. I don't know. If you don't put things on your list initially, you can't go back later. A pre-closing walkthrough that you do with your realtor to make sure everything's in the same condition is not an inspection. And people interchange those terms. So if there was something on the inspection report and the buyer's, it's not a big deal, you can't go back later. And along those lines, during attorney review, failing to include a contingency. If you need a mortgage, and I've had this happen, and I'm sure you have too, a lot of buyers are coming in through the back door and they're saying, no, cash. And then they get a mortgage and then all of a sudden they need a contingency for it, or my mortgage isn't coming through when I thought it would. That's not a contingency. So you can't go through the back door and try to sneak that in later. If you're buying a condo and you have a 30-pound dog, man, you need to review those pet policies. If you want to rent the condo out after a year, review the rental policy. Make it a contingency.
And there's a lot of those. How about people that want to have home offices?
Well,
they want to run a business.
Yes, run a business is a big one. And usually if you're running a business like on your own, like what you're doing or what I'm doing, if you don't have customers come to the residence.
No, but it's like therapists.
Therapists, piano teachers,
right,
tutors, that's a different animal. And you really need to review those HOA documents because people are going to complain about parking, about traffic, about people running up and down the hallways, who's coming into this building. I keep hearing the doorbell. So that's a big one. Other on that line, the HOA documents, when you're buying a condo or a townhome, you have to review those documents. Again, I get them, mandatory disclosure for condos in Illinois. I send them to you. You have to read them. I can read them. I don't have pets, so I may not know what's important. Can you rent it out? Sometimes the window coverings have to be uniform. Sometimes there are restrictions on contractors. Financials. Get the minutes. People always say, oh, I don't need the minutes for. Do people get along in this building? Do they like each other? Are they fighting about every single thing? You're living in this place. You're living there. I'm not. Do they need to read tuck point? That's going to be a $10,000 assessment. Do all the units need a new balcony? That may not be a special assessment. It will most likely be in the minutes. Oh, we've been talking about new balconies for 2 years. This is a year we're going to do it. Guess what? You're going to have a special assessment for those balconies. The next thing I would say is gauging your timing. I've been closing deals in 2 and 3 weeks, cash deals. Everybody's motivated. Boom, it's over. Not everybody can close that quickly. So if you have a quick close, talk to your lender. If your money's tied up in a 401k or you have to pull money out of something, make sure you can get that money. On the flip side, a lot of sellers, I'm sure you see this, they don't know where they're going. I sold my house for this great price. Where am I going? And they can't close we'll close over the summer. Well, if a buyer's getting a loan, they're going to lose that nice rate. And the lender has to reapprove them. So be mindful of these times and discuss them with everybody, your lender, your broker, your lawyer. Blowing a deadline is bad. As a lawyer, I will calendar these dates up for you. I will send you reminders. But if I send you a reminder on Tuesday that says, hey, your mortgage contingency is up on Friday, and the buyer says, I don't know where I'm going to apply for my loan. I can't control that, but it's too late at that point.
Right.
Buyers have an obligation to deal in good faith and fair dealing. That means if you say you're going to get a loan, apply for the loan. If you say it's a cash deal, make sure those funds are ready to go. Insurance is a big one. When you're a buyer, I tell people I think it's called a CLUE report, CLUE. It's a report on past claim history. So if you're buying an older house and you find out, well, there was a fire due to electrical, there was a flood, you may not be able to get insurance. May not be insurable. That doesn't happen a lot, but I tell people on the buyer beware track, get a CLUE report.
Right. And if your lender will also, but if you're buying it cash.
Right. Or if your loan contingency is not for 45 days and your lender doesn't get the report for 3 weeks out, it's kind of late at that point.
Right.
I would say the last thing is, I know it getting on this nerd train I'm on, reviewing title and survey. I mean, people get it. They don't look at it. If you have a survey and there's a fence where you don't like it, or there's an encroachment on title, if there are restrictions, a lot of older restrictions are not enforceable anymore. But there could be a restriction that affects you, no fences, or the fences have to be a certain height.
Well, that's a big one, is fences. You need to be sure if you want a fence or you want a pool. There's a lot of communities that do not allow
absolutely
fences. Out in Barrington or Hawthorne Woods, they don't want fences all over. So,
and really, this all shows up in title and survey. So even if you don't want a pool and you don't care about the fence, when you sell this property down the line, that's going to show up. You have to remember, title and survey follow the property.
Right.
And you can't get rid of it. I have, under some circumstances, gotten rid of old non-enforceable covenants. The title companies, that's not their job. Their job is not to make those things easier.
Right.
And again, carry that camera, cell phone with you.
I think there's two big takeaways. Read all your documents. And if it's too much, at least go through with somebody to pick out the important parts. I mean, everything in the contract isn't going to apply to you if you're a buyer because you don't have any of these situations.
Right.
But take the time to read your inspections, read the minutes and then the bylaws and documents. You really do have to pay attention to what you're doing because otherwise, I had someone who was a doctor and he bought this house and he had an inspection. And later he was screaming and calling everybody because he was mad because the slider wasn't working. It was right there in his inspection. And as an agent, I didn't know that I had to tell him, be sure he wasn't a 20-year-old new buyer.
Right.
What is he going to do? I mean, he didn't read it. So he can be as mad as he wants. It was in black and white. So
and a lot of inspectors, if you ask them, they'll send you a summary page.
Oh yeah, they do. And they'll even go over everything. They're happy to go over and tell you what they know and what they don't know, but you do have to take the time. So I think that's important.
And these contracts that we use in Chicago, I will say they're pro seller. So if you're a seller, you're probably not going to make a lot of changes. If you're a buyer, it is buyer beware, and the buyer's attorney is going to have a lot of changes, but some of them are, they're really not going to matter at the end of the day. That's not to say you shouldn't ask for them, but I look at this again, everybody wants to be happy. The seller wants to get the money.
Absolutely.
The buyer's getting a beautiful new home, keys, a yard.
And you know what? That is our job, to keep them off the ledge, keep the emotions down, and get through the process. And I tell people that's really what we do. There are a million things that can go wrong, and we navigate the process for you.
And it's really communication. It really comes down to that. I don't know if you're a cell phone person, if you're a text person, if you're an email person, whatever it is, if you head these problems off early on in the process, usually people can work out an amicable resolution. If you forget to tell people, or if a buyer's going out of town during a contingency and I can't reach them, that's a problem. So just be upfront and be honest.
Yes, totally. Well, I want to thank you, Sue. You've been super, super informative. We have all these things to remember and to keep in the back of our minds so that we are protected and we know where to go if we need help. So again, I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to wish everybody a happy weekend. So I think we're supposed to get really nice weather. So, all right, bye now.
Bye.